is something that the church has not handled well historically. We've not talked and handled well mental health in the history of the church very well. If you look over all the misconceptions of what mental health is and what it is to struggle, and so I was like, bro, whatever I can do, you just let me know. I am here for you. What topic would you like me to come and talk about? And he said, I want you to come and I want you to encourage the people about depression. I was like, you want me to talk about depression? Could you give me a topic that is more depressing than depression? But I'm here and I'm thankful. And part of the reason why I say it's depressing, because let's be honest, one of the reasons that it's tough to talk about depression is because that depression causes us to have to talk about things in a way that the church has not typically talked about things. If you grew up in church, you probably never heard a message on depression. If you grew up in the church, you definitely didn't hear people talk about mental health. What they told you to do with mental health is that if you're having a struggle, you just means you're not praying enough, or you're not saved enough, or you just haven't let God do enough in your life. If you've heard anything on mental health in the church, it's never really been an encouragement about taking the steps necessary to become mentally healthy. It was always, well, you just need to add some more spirituality into your life. And I'm not knocking spirituality as a pastor. Trust me, I recognize that God has done in my life things that I can never do on my own, that I have access to the creator of the heavens and the universe because of Jesus. And I also recognize that there have been people who have spoken into my life in some of the struggles that I have dealt with and some that I'll share with you today, that they were God sent. And it was a spiritual conversation. As the day I said yes to Jesus is the moment they looked at me and said, hey, I think you should go get help. Or, hey, I think you should make a phone call. Or, hey, have you thought about going and talking to someone? Now, one of the reasons I don't want to tell you about my mental health struggle is because the moment I open up about it, you know about me. The moment I open up about it, I have to take the mask off to talk about my struggle. Part of the reason we don't want to talk about mental health in the church is because we would prefer to be able to walk in here and say, you know what, I'm blessed, I'm taken care of, I'm highly favored. Of course you are, yes, duh, tell me things that I don't know about you. Hey, how you doing today? Oh, I'm blessed. Like, could you just say good? I feel like the reason that sometimes people don't want to come into church is because in the church, we're weird. We say some weird stuff. Like, your life is falling apart and you're blessed? Like, how about, like, my life is falling apart and I'm a mess. Like, my life is falling apart and I don't know what to do, and you're all like, I'm blessed. Like, what's up? I was just seeing how many people were here back in the 90s. So it's good to know that there are some people from the 1900s here in this room today. But when I talk about mental health, I've got to open up about me. And I love me. I love me some me. But when I talk about mental health, I got to talk about the dark parts. I got to talk about the parts that I would rather hide and not talk about and not bring up. And so while I say all of that to say that you can't talk about the subject of depression without disclosing some of your own struggle. So hi, my name is Chad, and I have struggled, and probably will struggle, and will battle with depression. Oh, okay, good. I was seeing anybody else there been in one of those circles. Hi, my name is Chad.
Hi, Chad. We're glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here, even if I have to talk about depression. Also, let me say to this, as a licensed minister of the gospel, I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not a mental health expert. I'm not a medical doctor. And so while prayer and faith and community are vital, they are not replacements for professional help, medical treatment, or counseling. So if you're battling deep depression, please know that does not qualify you or make you less spiritual. It does not make you less faithful. It does not make you, does not put you in a place you're not where you are because God has turned his back on you. And if you're struggling, please, 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 hear me out. Reach out to a medical professional. Reach out to to a counselor. Reach out to your pastor, someone that trusted that can connect you with one of those individuals. Do not try to go at this alone. If you find yourself in any sort of immediate crisis, there's a suicide crisis and a lifeline, you text 988, you send them a text, they'll text you back. If you don't want to make a call, you can text. If you want to call, they'll talk to you and help you get the help that you need in the moment. Like, what? We're talking about that in church? Yes, because it's that important. Because what we don't realize when it comes to mental health is that it's a life and death issue. I don't want to be so spiritual that I look at you and say, oh, well, you're just all wrapped up. You need some more of Jesus and it'll just take care of all your depression. I recognize that Jesus can do things in a moment, in an instant, that nobody can. But there are also times that he has to walk with you step by step, day by day. The old song, the old church used to sing, one day at a time, sweet Jesus. They recognized they couldn't go anywhere without him, and they needed to hold his hand and him hold theirs every single step of the way. So it's one day at a time, sweet Jesus. And when it comes to mental health, it's not something that I want to make light of. I don't want to over-spiritualize it. Because I recognize there's so much shame attached to mental health. And there's no shame in reaching out. The enemy of your soul has prepared a banquet table to preoccupy you and deceive you from reaching out to get the treatment that you need. How do I know? Because again, the church for way too long has said, just pray about it. I confided in a pastor once upon a time and his wife about a struggle of anxiety that my wife and I were having. My oldest daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 4.5 years old. That meant that she received at least 4 to 5 shots every single day, that I was the one giving them to her. That meant that I was the one holding her down as she's screaming out like she is being tortured, and I'm giving her something that I know she has to have in order to save her life. And I confided in this pastor, and I don't knock them. I love them. I think they're good people. I think they just gave me really bad advice. And instead of saying, Chad, I'm so sorry. Hey, let's tell me more. Let me put my arm around you. It was like, well, here's what you need to pray. Like, bro, I don't need to pray anything at 2 a.m. I'm tired. I'm exhausted because I'm waking up at 2 a.m. every night to check blood sugars to see, do I need to give more insulin or do I need to wake her up? Do I need to give her a sugary drink? Like, what is, I need something practical. So today I want to try to give you something practical. I don't want to look at you and say, well, just suck it up, buttercup. Come on, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, because let's be honest, we live in this culture, and that's the machismo, I mean, like, hey, I get it. Men need to be men, and we got to be more masculine. We got to be whatever. But look, when you're hurting, period, point blank. That's all. And so when there's a struggle, we need to be able to talk about the struggle. We need to be able to say, you know what, I'm not perfect. I'm not fine. I'm not good where I am right now. Because when we have a headache, you know what you do? You reach for that Advil. Because you can't reach for Tylenol because that causes too many things. So you got to reach for the Advil. I don't want to touch the tism, so I'm going to reach for the Advil, okay? And then you know what? If you're sick, you go to the doctor. If you don't go to the doctor, she tells you to go to the doctor. If you still don't go to the doctor, Jesus may have saved you from some of the things on the top shelf, but he ain't saved you from the NyQuil. You know what I'm saying? Like, you still go for the NyQuil. You'll still go for the Benadryl. Benadryl may cause Alzheimer's. They said there's a connection to Alzheimer's and Benadryl. Either I can go to bed being able to breathe, or I can wake up one day and have Alzheimer's. I don't know which one you take, but you take the medication. So we have the medicine that we take. We go to the doctor. We set an appointment. If there's a diagnosis, we'll ask for prayer and schedule the best specialist we can find. Though when it comes to our mental health, it's the invisible struggle that nobody knows about. There are people right now, you're in here right now, you're hearing me. You know the struggle that you're dealing with that nobody else knows about. Because you're worried that if you share about it, what is it that they'll say? Who will they recommend you to go see? You don't want to go see anybody. You got this. You can handle it. You can take care of it. The problem is that you can't. The problem is that it's all good until you reach the point where you can't handle it. And you can't do it on your own. And you dare not ask for prayer because of what others might think about you. You have this invisible struggle. There's a stigma that says, I have to do this on my own. I dare not go see a doctor because I don't need somebody telling me I'm crazy. In case no one's ever told you, it's not that you're crazy. You're not. Mental health is a real illness. Mental health is a real issue. Those feelings are real. They may be negative feelings, and your negative feelings are real. Those emotions you feel, those things are real. I'm not minimizing that. I'm just saying that sometimes the emotions and the thoughts and the things that we feel and that we think aren't connected to fact. And so one of the things that a mental health professional is able to do is to be able to connect us to the facts, connect us to the thoughts that are righteous and that are holy and that are pure and that are for us, that aren't against us. I know that in the last couple of weeks you've talked about being able to have those thoughts that line up with what God says about you. That you're not dwelling on those things that have nothing to do with what God is saying about you, that you stand on the promises and the truths of God's word. So those feelings are real. Most importantly, here's what I want you to know, that you're not alone. Yeah. Statistics tell us that 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 people will struggle with clinical depression in their lifetime. Yeah. So that means that if we all counted off today, 1, 2, 3, 4, every third or fourth one of us, 25 to 30% of this room has or will struggle with depression. And I say has or will because even if you've battled depression, you know that it's a battle that's not over. It's not a battle just like one-time thing, take the pill, and then you don't have to worry about it again. It's a part of an ongoing thing that you continue to do, that it's not just about being in a bad mood, it's not just about being in a funk, but depression lingers. The simplest definition is that depression is a serious medical illness. So it's serious, it's medical, it's legitimate, it's an illness characterized by ongoing sadness and hopelessness. A loss of interest in activities lasting and in activities that negatively impact daily life and last for at least 2 weeks. So this isn't, hey, you wake up in a funk and so you had a bad day. Like this is, somebody else was born in the 90s, maybe 80s. I don't know. I can't tell. It's too bright. But all I know is that this is different than being in a mood. This is different than being in a mood, but this is a lasting, it continues to linger. It's a darkness, it's a funk, it's a fog. And so I know this because about 5 years ago, I found myself just kind of in a fog, and it just seemed to linger. I couldn't figure out how to get out of it. I didn't know what was going on. I just knew that I didn't feel like me. I just knew that something wasn't right, and so I couldn't shake it. So I made an appointment with a counselor. I sat down with the counselor, and he said, "So tell me about myself. Tell me about yourself." And so I gave him what amounted to basically a quick resume of my life. I told him where I'd worked, where I'd been, this is who I am, and lots of bullet points about what I had done. And then he asked me something along the lines of, is there anything else? And I was like, oh, you want the bad stuff. Well, hey, doc, how much time you got? What meds are you on? Because you might be on some after we're done. And so I began to tell him, hey, look, I can remember these are the things that happened and things that I felt, and the trauma of my parents to divorce, the trauma of being sexually abused by an authority figure, the spiritual abuse I had experienced working at a church, the feelings of inadequacy and failure, of not always feeling like the person I looked at in the mirror, a feeling that there was a fog that had settled over my life, and I couldn't make out what direction I was headed, and I was unsure of what my next steps were. Just to sum it all up. And at some point he looked at me and was like, bro, you got to stop. And I was like, what? No, he didn't really say that. I'm joking. He actually looked at me and was like, well, our time is up for today. Come back next week when we'll be able to, talk more. And so I did. He's like, but he said this, because I was kind of worried maybe I'd scared him. Maybe he never heard some things. And he just looked at me and he said, you've given us some things today that we can definitely work through, and that we can work through going forward. And I was like, going forward? I don't even know which way is forward. I'm in this fog. I'm in this funk. I don't know what direction is which way. He's like, don't worry. We've got some things that we can work on going forward. And if you've ever experienced depression, then you can relate to that. Because you know what it is to wake up and feel like you just can't get out of bed. You know what it is to wake up and know that you have to be somewhere, but you don't have the energy or the gumption or whatever it is to be able to get out of bed. You know what it is to feel like you are letting other people down because of the way that you feel on the inside, and you feel that you can't pull things together. Depression often gains its footing in our lives when we go through things, when there is extended trauma, when life doesn't line up with the version of life that we experience, doesn't line up with the version of life that we believe that we should have had. When our version of reality doesn't meet with the expectations that we had, and there's this gap, and the gap between reality and expectation is frustration. And when you're continually frustrated, when you're continually hurt, when you're continually replaying the thoughts of the trauma that you've experienced, when you're continually beating yourself up over the steps of things that you should have done, the missteps that you've taken in life, eventually you should know that your brain is always listening. Your brain is always keeping a tally. God may forgive you of your past and wipe your past clean, but your brain does not. Your brain is constantly on, it's constantly listening. In fact, when it comes to depression, you have those traumatic, emotional, physiological responses that you have, but then there's also biological responses that happen. People who have had concussions, who have been in wrecks, my father-in-law suffered a severe concussion, a traumatic brain injury. It opened up a door of depression that he experienced for years that he had no idea why. He thought it, and not to tell his story for him, but it was all because of an accident that had happened. So there are these things that trigger on the outside, biological, that cause us to face the things that we face when it comes to our mental health. And for too long, the church has sat quietly, or for too long, the church has dismissed that there's a real issue. If you've ever had a moment where you paused, you looked around at your circumstances, and you asked the question, how in the world did I end up here? Then today is for you. Maybe it was a career path that ended unexpectedly. Maybe it was a marriage that looked rock solid on your wedding day, but now feels distant and cold. Maybe it's a personal struggle, a dark cloud that settled over your life 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Maybe it was the loss of a loved one. Maybe it was the mourning of a situation and a circumstance that didn't go the way that it was supposed to go. When there's that gap between what you expected God to do and what you're actually experiencing, it creates this unique kind of pain. And if we're honest, most of us secretly assume, maybe not publicly, but we secretly assume that if God is involved, my life should be having this forward, upward trajectory. That I shouldn't be struggling to make forward progress, that I shouldn't be moving backwards. And if you've ever walked through a season of depression, you also know that one of the hardest parts of the pain is the isolation that you feel. The isolation that you feel because you don't want to deal with people, but you know that you need them, but you don't want to deal with them. Like you know you should probably go and be around them, but you also know that sometimes it's just hard to get out of bed, and this is a struggle. Again, when I'm talking about clinical depression here, I'm not talking about you're in a mood and you don't know if you like them today or not. And I'm saying like these are the things that you know you're supposed to be somewhere, but you can't get there because of what's going on internally. It's waking up and feeling an overwhelming sense of emptiness, looking out at a world where everyone else seems to be moving, laughing, and living while you live completely frozen. And if you're a person of faith, depression carries a secondary weight because you sit in church. Or at Promise Go, you got to stand. We ain't going to let you sit there in church. If you hear the songs and you wonder, why can't I just pray my way out of this? Why can't I believe my way out of this struggle? Why can't I see God be faithful in the way that we sing these songs? Why can't I see the victory? Why am I stuck in this pit? Why can't I choose joy just like the song tells me to, like everybody else tells me to, like everybody's encouraging me to? And so you do what most of us do. You pretend. I'll just fake it until I make it. You put on the face. You answer that you're fine when you're actually drowning. There's a word for that in the Greek. The English translation of that word is actor. Jesus talked about actors when he said, "Woe are the hypocrites." The Greek word for actor is hypocrite. It's people who put on a mask and pretend to be something that they're not. Now, the world has an idea. The church has an idea what a hypocrite is. That's someone who, you live like, hell on Saturday and you come into church on Sunday and you act like everything's all right. You're heaven-focused on Sunday morning. But the reality is that a hypocrite is just someone who pretends to be something that they're not. Mental health has a way of causing us to all be hypocrites. Mental health has a way of causing us to disguise the people that we are because we don't want anyone else to know. We want anyone else to just know what it is that we're actually dealing with. And so we tell ourselves that once I get past this depression, I can get back to my life. Once this dark clouds lifts, then God can use me again. In our culture, we tend to view depression as this deep emotional darkness. And if we're willing to even take this step, we even call it, some of us may have grown up in churches that would look at you and say, if you're depressed, then you're a spiritual failure. But I'm here today to tell you that you're not. That you're not a spiritual failure. And that depression is more than just a temporary detour from real life. We assume that if God's involved in our lives, our trajectory should be upward, that there should be more happiness, that there should be more light. But what if the pit that you find yourself in today isn't just a detour? What if it's that God has not allowed you to be in this place, but what if it is that the place that you find yourself in today is actually the place where you find that God has been working all along? One of the stories in the Bible that I marvel at is the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis. If you don't read the Bible, let me tell you, you need to open up your book. You need to open up the book. You need to read. The story of Joseph is a blockbuster event. The story of Joseph, Hollywood needs to just go back. I know that there are some movies that have been done, but I'm telling you, the story of Joseph, if it was a movie, it's a blockbuster. It's got all the elements. There's a young man with a promising future. There's betrayal. There's a redeeming comeback after comeback. If you don't know the story, it all begins in Genesis chapter 37. Genesis is the first book of your Bible. It's part of the Jewish Bible, the Old Testament. So these stories have been having traction, have been told for thousands of years. And in the story of Joseph, just focusing on the dramatic events, we often focus just on the dramatic events, that he was this youngest brother. Now, if you are a younger sibling, we hate you. No, we don't hate you. It's just that we know that you got everything that you asked from mom and dad, and the rest of us had to struggle through life, and we as the oldest were like, we were like the parents' first version. What's it called? There's a word I can't, it's not like on the tip of my tongue. We were like, as the oldest kids, we were the trial version. Yes, thank you. We were the trial version, like, yeah, you get the trial version for 14 days, and if you still want it after that, if you don't cancel before the 14 days are up, you're kind of stuck with this. I feel like that's how it is as an older child. Whereas, like, the second child comes, and the baby of the family, however many it takes for you to have the baby of the family, and they're just like, refreshing, I don't know. Or as a baby, maybe you just got forgotten, but normally that happens to the middle kid. I digress. We look at Joseph's life and we skim right past over some of the years that he spent in complete and unrelenting darkness. We look at Joseph at the end of his life, and when his brothers are having to come to him and beg for food because they're in the midst of a famine in Israel, and Joseph is able to stand there before his brothers, and he gives them food, and he's reunited with his dad, and there's all of this. Like, it's an amazing story at the end that you have to read in order to see God's faithfulness and through it all. But if you look at Joseph's story, you learn that he's the youngest son of Jacob. Now, Jacob, if you're not familiar, or if you are, when it was talked about the God of Israel, Jacob and Israel are the same person. God changes Jacob's name to Israel. Jacob's dad was Isaac, and then Isaac's dad was Abraham. So in the time that Joseph's life is happening, and prior to Joseph's life happening, when they would talk about God, there were many gods. They believed that there were many gods, but there was one true God, and that was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Joseph is Jacob's youngest son, and he's the baby brother. And so baby bro has a dream one day. He has this dream that one day all 11 of his brothers are going to come before him, and they're going to bow down along with their mother and their father. They're going to bow down before him. It's not a problem that he has the dream. The problem really occurs when he goes and tells his brothers, guys, you will not believe the dream that God just gave me. One day, you're going to be laying in front of me, bowing down before me. That didn't go so well with the brothers. In fact, it went so poorly that they did what you would probably do if your baby brother told you that you're going to bow down before me. Like, bow down, watch this. More like, we're fixing to kill you. And that's what they did. They decided, you know what? Watch us bow down. We will kill you. So they plot to kill him. While they're plotting to kill him and what to do, one of his brothers, Reuben, decides, here's what we should do. Instead of kill him right here, right now, let's throw him in this pit. We'll put him in the pit, and Reuben's plan was actually to come back and secretly rescue Joseph because he was like, these guys are, I know we're related, but I don't want, he didn't want to claim, you ever had some relatives you didn't want to, I'm not y'all. I've been to some churches where there were people they didn't want to claim the relatives that they had, okay? And so Reuben is like, you know what? I can't claim these guys. I gotta protect baby brother because I recognize how important he is to mom and to dad. So Reuben says, let's throw him in a pit. So they do that. Joseph comes and sees him, and they I don't know if they gave him a hug. I don't know what they did. They gang tackled him, whatever they did. But next thing you know, he's in a pit. And he's not just in any pit. He's actually in a cistern, a water cistern. And so he's been captured, and he's been thrown in this pit. So here's where we pick up in Genesis chapter 37, verse 24. It says, they took him and they threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. The cistern was empty, and there was no water in it. So I want you to think about this image. The cistern is not just this big open pit, but a cistern was actually about 15 to 20 feet deep, and it was built in the shape of a pear. So it had a more narrow opening than it did at the bottom. The whole purpose of this cistern was to collect the rainwater whenever it did rain in the desert, was to be able to collect the rainwater, and the whole purpose of the cistern was to sustain life in the desert. And here's Joseph. He's stuck in the bottom. There's no way of climbing out. He's sitting there. It's cold. It's dark. It's silent. His brothers have trapped him, and they've trapped him in a place that's supposed to support life. The intended purpose of the cistern was to hold the most valuable resource in the desert, water. And he's been trapped in a place that sole purpose and design was to sustain life. Let me tell you what, when you deal with depression, it can feel like you can be in the exact place that God has got you and supposed to be, life is supposed to be sustained, and feel like you are dark, you're in the dark, you're at the bottom, and you're cold, and you're all alone. Even when you feel like you're in the place that God is supposed to have you. And there he sits, stuck in the dark. You can imagine the confusion he's facing as he sits isolated from everywhere. Everyone he loves, the people that he loved him, he's completely helpless. He's unable to get out of the pit on his own. He's confused. He's stuck in isolation. If you know the rest of the story, you know that this isn't the last pit that Joseph would ever find himself in. Eventually, there's this group of traders who are traveling with their caravan of camels. They're headed to Egypt. And as they approach Joseph's brothers, they have this idea, let's sell Joseph off to slavery. Let's see what we can get for him. We'll sell him into slavery, and then we're going to take his wonderful, beautiful coat that Dad gave him. We're going to take that coat, we're going to dip it in goat's blood, and we're going to go tell Daddy that he died. And that's what they did. So Joseph is sold off into slavery. He's headed towards Egypt. When he gets to Egypt, those traders who trade things then sell Joseph again into slavery into the hands of a man named Potiphar. Now, while Joseph is with Potiphar, it seemed like everything was going right until one day Joseph is wrongly accused by Potiphar's wife. And Joseph ends up in a pit. Again, he's now in a prison dungeon. Everything was looking up for Joseph until it wasn't. And so for 13 years of Joseph's life, he lived in this state of extended loss, confinement, and darkness. It's this constant cycle of finding himself back in this place of darkness. It's this constant cycle of his life looking like God didn't have a care in the world about him. And yet Joseph remains faithful. The Bible doesn't record Joseph singing worship songs in the dungeon. It doesn't pretend that he had it all together. He was just simply a human being who found himself in a dark place after dark place without his own choosing. And if you look and read Genesis carefully, there's something that's interesting, I think. You'll notice something that's missing in those 13 years. God never, ever gives Joseph an explanation. God never, ever says, I'm doing this for your benefit. Just wait and see what I'm about to do. God never gives him any sort of word of encouragement or strengthens him. He never sends an angel and says, hey, Joseph, just hang on for a few more years. Don't worry, buddy, your big day is coming. Joseph endured the darkness without knowing when or if it would ever end. Doesn't that sound like depression? Well, I mean, we're not going to say amen to that because then we would have to admit that we know what depression feels like. But it could sound like depression. I don't know. Never knowing when the darkness is going to end. Never knowing when the struggle is going to stop. And yet there's this question I have that permeates every situation that Joseph experiences that I would ask if I was Joseph, and that is, God, where are you? Where's God in the midst of the struggle? Where's God in the midst of the pit? Where's God in the dungeon? Where was God when Joseph's brothers plotted against him and threw him in the cistern? Where was God when he was sold into slavery? Not once, but twice. Where was God when he was being wrongly accused? Thrown into the dungeon of a prison, yet again, one more pit. In the midst of all of it, if you read Joseph's story, you get to turn over to Genesis chapter 39, and 3 different times in that chapter it says that the Lord was with Joseph. That the Lord was with Joseph when he was in Potiphar's house, and he elevated Joseph to a place of standing and position. That Joseph had authority in Potiphar's house until he was wrongly accused and found himself in prison. And then it says, even when Joseph was in the dungeon, the Lord was with Joseph. And it says later on that, again, it just reiterates that the Lord was with Joseph, even in the midst of the darkness. And let me just encourage you, wherever you find yourself on the spectrum of the darkness, whether you are coming out of it and you said, you know what, I've followed the plan that's been given to me, and here I am now on the other side of darkness and depression, or you're going through it, or wherever you are on the gamut, let me encourage you with this, that God is with you in the midst of it all. That he is faithful. Timothy is told by Paul in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 13. Paul says, hey, Timothy, here's something you need to know, son. I don't have much life left on this earth, but here's a faithful saying. I need you to know it. He says, God is faithful even when we're faithless because he can't deny himself. I need you to know that God is faithful even when you feel like you've been unfaithful and you are faithless. God can't change his character. That's who he is. And so he's faithful. God was there when he was plotted against. God was with him through the false accusations. God was present in the pit of the isolation, which tells me about God's character. No matter what you're facing, he'll be present. No matter where you go. Even if Psalm 139 says, if I choose to make my bed in the deepest, darkest pit of despair, God can still find me. He's there. It's coming out of the darkest moments of despair that I've only been able to realize that God was truly there. I'll be honest, when I made the phone call to schedule the appointment to talk to the counselor, I wasn't sure that God was there. When I was handed the prescription and said, here, I want you to start taking this, I wasn't sure that God was there. I don't know at what point along the line that I actually had that moment and realization that, you know what, God is still with me in all of this. But I can say it now looking back. And I say looking back in terms of I can look back 5 years ago, but I also know that part of the struggle still remains, and part of the struggle is still a daily thing, and part of the struggle is still with me, and I carry that with me. I mean, I believe in 2 things in life that I will hold on to for the rest of my life: prayer and Prozac. And for the ADHDs in the room, which I am one, Adderall. But that's beside the point. Like, hey, I will hold on to those things. I will do those things. But I recognize that God has been faithful in every challenge that we face. And sometimes the biggest challenge that we face is trying to faithfully cling to God, even when everything says we should just let go. So as you find yourself in the dark, I want to give you just a few, like, just truth-filled, here's some takeaways you can do with what you want. Put them on a bumper sticker, get the tattoo, write them down, put them in your notes, whatever. But here's what you do. When you're facing depression, when you're facing the darkness, when you're unsure what to do, here's just a few things. Number one, stop fighting the reality of where you are. Stop fighting the reality of where you are. Which means I have to be honest with me when I'm struggling. I have to be honest with me. Yeah, trust me, like I would rather talk about anything up here today than this. Because I'm like, these people are going to think less of me. I know you're not, but like it's still in my head. Like I've stood and publicly preached the gospel for 25 years of my life over that. And yet, I know people are for me, but there's still something that says when I'm talking about this, I'm going to be judged. They're going to think differently about me. But you just got to stop fighting the reality of where you are. It's okay to admit that you're in a dark place. You can love Jesus, cuss a little bit, and still live in a dark place. Well, I'm not saying you can cuss a little bit. I'm just saying there are people that cuss a little. I don't know what the theological position of Promise Co. is on profanity, but let me just say this. You can love Jesus. I know what my opinion, but anything said today does not necessarily, I need another, represent the Promise Co., the people connected to it, or the pastors. All right. I need a disclaimer, thank you. It's okay to be in a dark place and love Jesus. That doesn't mean something is wrong with your spiritual relationship. It's okay to be connected to Jesus and have dark thoughts. It's okay to be connected with Jesus and not feel like everything is right. You need to know that everything is right with you and Him, but in having those thoughts doesn't disqualify you. Having questions and doubts doesn't disqualify you. You got to stop fighting the reality of where you are. It's okay to call it what it is. If you're grieving, then call it grief. If you're grieving something that happened years ago, it's all right to talk about that grief. You're grieving. Grief is a funky animal. It's a bad thing. I mean, it comes in waves. It'll hit you when you didn't even expect you. Dates that you didn't even know were important all of a sudden hit, and there are waves upon waves of grief in the way that it comes. And over time, as you've had those thoughts and that response, and your brain is processing all of that, eventually it says, you know what? I'm just so overwhelmed. I can't get out of this place. It's okay to admit that you're in a dark place. Naming your struggle isn't a lack of faith. Naming your struggle is the beginning of healing. Call it what it is. If you're anxious and you're feeling anxious and you're worried, call it what it is. That doesn't mean that you still don't lay it at Jesus' feet. Be anxious about nothing. I can quote it too. But it doesn't mean that why do you think Paul said be anxious about nothing? Because he knows y'all some anxious folk. He knows worry is a part of your life. Call it what it is. Joseph couldn't pretend he wasn't in prison. He just didn't let the prison define his worth. So depression is something, know this, depression is something that you're experiencing. It's not who you are. Anxiety is something that you're experiencing. It's not who you are. Grief is something that you're experiencing. It's not who you are. Suicidal ideation is something that you've experienced. It's not who you are. Number two, take life one small step at a time. In prison, Joseph couldn't control his future. All he could do was serve the person in the cell next to him. All he could do was just put one step in front of the other. Depression makes it hard to try to look at tomorrow. It makes looking at tomorrow feel impossible. Don't look at tomorrow. Just focus on the next step. Again, I said that, back in the day, there was that song, One Day at a Time, Sweet Jesus. One day at a time. Just one day, one step at a time, just little baby steps. It's all you can do. If that's all you can do, do what you can do. Don't worry about tomorrow. Just focus on today. Take the step that you can take today. Take the next step. Eat the meal. Take the walk. Call a friend. Text them how you're feeling. Make an important appointment to go get help. And then thirdly is this: recognize that God supernaturally works through practical tools. When Joseph was in prison, God used practical means. He used other people. He used relationships, daily tasks to sustain him. When you're dealing with depression, it means using tools that God has provided. Use the tools of therapy. Use the tools of the doctors, the counselors. Use the tools of the medication. If you're prescribed medication, take it. If you're prescribed it, take it. Look, God loves doctors. God gave us doctors. There's some people in the world like, hell, you don't need a doctor. We'll just pray about it. Well, have you ever thought that maybe God's answer to prayer is through that doctor's calling on their life to treat the people, to go through the experiences and the training that they've had so that they can then be the hands and feet of Jesus in that way? Just saying. And if you're anti-doctor, then you're going to have a big problem reading the New Testament. Because about 30% of the New Testament is written by Dr. Luke. He writes the Gospel of Luke and he writes the book of Acts. Paul writes all these other letters. I said in the first service that if you're reading Luke's work, Luke is like, he's a documentary. Like Luke gives you a documentary of Jesus' life, he gives you a documentary of the early church, of the beginnings of the early church in the book of Acts. And then there's Paul, who's like writing 13 different letters. He's like, here's the Instagram reels. Here's the reels and here's a story, and Luke is like, here's the documentary. But Luke actually writes, I've always said it this way, Paul wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, or he wrote half the New Testament. Luke actually, word count, writes more than Luke. Luke writes more than Paul. So God's given us doctors. Pray first, Prozac second. Getting help isn't a lack of trust in God, it's applying the wisdom that God's given us. Getting help, seeking medical help, isn't a lack of trust in God. It's applying the wisdom that He's given you. And I say all this, and the reason that I think that this series is so important, as we wrap it up, is can you imagine what our community would look like if the church would stop pretending like we had it all together? You know, that's what I love about this church. Like, one of the first times that we came, I had just resigned the church that I was pastoring, partly because of mental health and just some stuff that was going on in our family, and I knew that it was the right thing in the time, some hurt that we had experienced. But can you imagine if the church was just authentic and just real? That they didn't the church wasn't trying to just put on airs and just try to, everybody's wearing their mask and I'm blessed and I'm fine, but they actually were like, you know what, I'm struggling here. You know what, this is where my weakness is. And it's okay that, because I know that Jesus is His peace and in His life, it's all made perfect in my weakness. I know that when I am weak, then I am strong because Jesus has given me strength. He's given me strength to endure the depression. He's given me strength to endure whatever it is that I'm facing. And it doesn't mean that they're not real and that it doesn't exist. It just means that Jesus has given me what I need. Imagine if church was a place where you could say, I'm in a pit right now, and instead of just receiving judgment or hollow encouragements and just some random platitudes, that you are met with grace and reassured of God's presence. So if you're struggling, know this, that God's not standing on the edge of your pit as you find yourself in that place of darkness today with His arms crossed just waiting for you to pull yourself up. This isn't about you pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. This isn't about you just finally getting all your ish together so that you can move on with life. This is about you recognizing that you can't do it on your own and that you shouldn't. I've shared this story here before. But several years ago, my youngest was about 2 years old, and I was getting him ready before church. And when your dad's the pastor, you know, dad has to have his shirt ironed. Dad has to present. So I'm trying to get him ready for church so that I can leave the house. As I'm there getting him ready, he's holding onto my shirt and he's wrinkling it. I just ironed that shirt. He's got it, and he's saying this over and over to me. Dad, I'm not going to fall. I'm not going to fall. I'm not going to fall. As he's got my shirt, and he's just grabbing a hold of it, and he's wrinkling the dog out of it. Now I'm going to have to go iron my shirt again. And I thought to myself as it hit me, you know what? He thinks, isn't that funny? He thinks that at 2 years old, his little grip strength is what is holding him up here on this table. When he doesn't realize I've got both of my hands on him, and he's not going anywhere. Let me encourage you. Some of you are in this place right now, and you are like, I am holding on with all that I can. I'm holding on with all that I can. Let me encourage you. Your grip strength is nothing compared to what God's is. Your grip strength, you're not holding on to him. He's holding on to you. You think you're not going to fall because of what you're doing? Trust me. Trust me. He's holding on to you, and he's not going to let you go. There is nothing that you can do that would ever cause him to say you're unlovable. There's nothing that you can do that would ever cause him to say that there's something wrong with you or you're less than or you don't, just because you think you don't have it all together. He is the one who is holding on to you. And he never lets go. So today, in this moment, I'm about to pray. I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet. Pastor Brandon's going to come. But I want to pray over you. Because I recognize that there are some of you in this moment that this message just resonates with you. I don't need you to confess it to me, but one of the steps that we talked about, one of the first steps that we talked about is just stop fighting the reality of where you are. If you're struggling, this is the place to admit it. In a moment, Pastor Brandon's going to come and he's going to wrap us all up. But if you're in a place today, I'm going to just ask everybody across this room if you'll close your eyes and bow your heads. If you're here and you're struggling and you're saying, Chad, would you pray for me? Would you pray over my struggle? Would you just lift your hand? I want to be able to pray for you. Yeah. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, keep going. Yeah, anybody else? I want to be able to pray for you today. Yeah. All the way in the back. Thank you. I see your hands. You can put them down. Father, in this moment, in this room, we thank you. We thank you that we're not alone in the struggle. That even though that the enemy would try to tell us that the battles that we face are things that we can't handle, that we should try to handle on our own, and we should try to sweep it under the rug, and that we shouldn't let anybody know about the struggles and the things that are going on. God, I thank you that you see what's going on in us before we ever even say anything. In fact, Jesus would tell us that you know what we need before we ever even think or ask. And as we come to you in this moment, and I recognize that there are lives that are literally hanging in the balance that feel like they're the ones holding on to you with the tightest grip that they can. I pray that you would remind them today that you are the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and all the beasts of the fields they're in. You are the one who is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we can think or ask. You are the God of immeasurably more. So I pray that you would use us as the church to come alongside those who are hurting inside these four walls and those who are hurting on the outside, and to be able to say that this is a place that you can come even with your hurt, even with your pain, even in the midst of the darkness and the pit that you find yourselves in, and know that we've got your back and that we are for you. And I pray over those who are looking and finding themselves maybe coming to a place to just admit for the very first time that they're struggling. They're struggling with depression. I pray that you would give them the courage to take whatever that next step is. May it be confiding in a friend, may it be calling a counselor, may it be reaching out to a pastor or asking, what should my next step be? God, help us to take the next step, because we know that you're for us, that you're not against us. We know that you are with us every single step of the way. And I thank you for all that you do. I pray your blessing over your people. I thank you that we don't walk in darkness alone, that you're with us in the pit. From the mountaintop to the valley, you were there in between it all. So God, would you bless your people? I speak blessing over them today. And I thank you for them. And I pray that they would take the steps to find the victory that you've given them and that you've promised them. And that you would use us to help others find that as well. And it's in Jesus' name I pray.